Hi, Paige here, the One Foot Gamer. How's it going? I am doing okay. I think today we're going to talk about those 10 things that can slow your D&D or any other RPG game for that matter to a crawl. Before I get into that though, I did want to address, some people ask, what's up with this room I'm in? Why is it so weird and messy? It's actually because I have two YouTube channels, this one and I have another one about eBay, that's One Foot Flipper. And this is my eBay office. Strangely enough, I film a lot of my One Foot Flipper videos down where I actually play D&D, but my D&D videos have so many notes that I kind of need them up on the screen in front of me to do the video, so I end up filming my D&D videos in my eBay office. So that's what's going on with that. And in fact, hey, let's have a little giveaway, shall we? Why don't you anybody post any comment down below, any comment whatsoever, and after a week I will randomly pick one and I will give the winner $20 credit to my eBay store. Alright, let's get into it. First thing that can slow that game to a crawl is the initiative system. Your modern initiative system especially can eat up massive amounts of game time. Everybody has to roll separately, have their rolls recorded, it all's got to be kept track of. Then once you get all that going, half the game masters are just going to cheat and sidestep the entire system and have all the enemies move at the same time anyway. And then of the ones who don't do that, most of them will have all the identical stat blocks move at the same time, which completely negates the whole point of that complicated initiative system. You went through all the work, but you didn't get the benefit of the system. Now, if you're doing this, one thing that can save a decent amount of time per session is to have one player, we'll call him Bob, quietly gather initiative rolls during the session. Always having a set or two ready to hand over the Game Master, as long as the Game Master's okay with you doing that. That'll save 2 minutes per combat easily. But if possible, I'd always suggest to everyone just use the simplest initiative option their game allows. That simple old school option of rolling once and alternating sides can just literally triple the number of encounters you can manage per game session. I am not kidding. I have so many games, 3.5, where we only get 2 or 3 fights out in the entire session, while I've had so many games of basic D&D where we've gotten 30 out in the same session. It's not even close. Now, that might not be fair on the surface in some versions of the game. Like in 3.5, characters might have wildly different initiative bonuses. Like when I'm playing 3rd edition D&D, I take improved initiative with almost every character I ever play, because it directly translates into getting to more actions overall, and thus more gameplay for me. So I wouldn't suggest introducing side initiative into 3rd, 4th, or 5th edition where everybody, including the Game Master, is playing by the rules. However, if the Game Master is grouping up the monsters, then you might as well just go to side initiative. You're basically already on it anyway. You're just going through a bunch of trouble to determine which order the players act in. What you can do here is the party can calculate their average initiative amount for their side, and then the Game Master can do whatever they want to because they were doing whatever they wanted to in the beginning. Second thing that can slow things down, although it's a lot of fun for one character: unnecessary scouting ahead, unnecessary searching, and otherwise stalling things up, making various checks. You can use a lot of time in that session to a rogue or ranger who insist on constantly scouting ahead of the group in every single situation. This can be somewhat understood if you're playing, 1st edition, where it's much more deadly and it may include encounters that players are supposed to avoid. However, here's what's going to happen in 3rd, 4th, or 5th edition. You're going to go through all those rolls in time of scouting ahead, and one of two things is going to happen. Either that scout is going to trigger the encounter while everybody else is far away, or they're going to see it and they're going to report back and say, "Oh, look, guys, another balanced encounter for our level." See, just not necessary most of the time. Your third one, too many players. Now, this is really only a problem if the game is being played in a style where each character is taking their individual turn in order. If you're in an old school game where the players all declare their actions at the beginning of the round and then can all roll or work on them all at once, then it's not a huge problem. However, say like a 3.5 or 4th edition game It appears that every character you add to the party above 4 multiplies the time each combat round takes by about 1.5. This is a combination of the larger number of characters causing more tactical changes to the situation. Thus, you can't be sure of what you're going to do right away because the entire situation might change by the time your action comes up. And players losing track of what's going on, losing interest as the amount of time between their turns just goes on for too long. I'd suggest keeping modern era D&D parties at exactly 4 players and not having more than 6 in Classic. Number 4, your storytellers. Every group has a Tony in it. Tony's a cool guy, though. He's been playing since he was 13. He has countless situation and character stories to tell from his old game sessions, and these might be the best stories in the world. But Tony tells these stories during combat. He tells them out of combat. And Tony can generally be assured to take up 25% of every game session with storytelling. The best way to deal with Tony is just for the game master to institute a no storytelling during gameplay rule. You can always have a mid-session play break, after 2 hours or so. That'll give Tony a chance to tell you all about his old pacifist Trolldecker Shadowrun character who got elected president. So Tony will still get to have that shining moment where he tells his story without messing up the rest of the game. Number 5, not having any sort of standard procedures. Your adventuring groups can have standard procedures for a lot of things that can save a lot of gameplay time. They can have a standard procedure for doors, perhaps. Listen first, check for traps, open locks, etc., only to be interrupted if something interesting comes up there. You know what? They can write that all on a card, give it to the Game Master, along with the character's percentage chance, or take 20 results, or whatever skills are relevant for your game. Then they can just say to the Game Master, standard, going to do the normal thing on the door. And if you've got henchmen or torchbearers, which are more common in classic D&D, then they can also have standing orders to deal with situations as well. Like, we've got a torchbearer / bag of holding carrier who sticks by the wizard in the back of the party, and his standing orders are, to keep crossbows, to keep a loaded crossbow to hand off to anybody who needs it, to bring potions to anybody who needs them, and more specifically, to flee with the wizard or the wizard's body, forcefully removing the wizard from combat if needed, because the torchbearer is far bigger and stronger than the wizard is, if 3 of the 5 PCs ever go down. That way, you can get the wizard back. The wizard's dead. Should be enough money in the bag of holding to raise him. And then the wizard, being the smartest character, can figure out how to try to retrieve the rest of the bodies. You can also save a lot of time in the long term by simply picking the left-right decision one time, staying with it. I'm going to assume you pick left here. Any situation where you have to decide between left and right and everything else is equal, then just go left. There's no need to have a discussion about it at all. All right, number 6, not having any sort of designated party roles. Well, it might be good for one of the characters to be just the default designated speaker when interacting socially with other creatures when there's no reason for it to be any specific person speaking. If there is a reason, if there is a reason for Tony to be talking to the kobolds, yeah, let Tony talk to the kobolds. Otherwise, just assume it's Dave, because Dave usually speaks for the group. One of the players should be the note takers, both recording any gameplay notes and items picked up. And if you've got a cohesive adventuring group, one of the players should be in command, having authority to make a decision if a consensus cannot be reached. There might also be 2 separate commanders, one in combat, one outside of combat. The polearm fighter whose player has the combat rules memorized and mastered, he might be the best combat commander. However, Tony, that wizard who has read all the novels for the setting, he might be the best commander outside of combat. And finally, if you're playing old school, somebody should probably be making a map. Or some groups may do it differently. In my current play group, everyone is in complete command of the area of their expertise. If it's about arcane magic, the wizard gets to make the final decision no matter what. If it's about scouting ahead or whatever, That is the thief's purview. It's about nature. The ranger gets to make the final decision, and so on. Just having these roles in the party can cut down severely on often pointless option discussion that could become to in seconds and not minutes. Number 7, your unprepared spellcasters. No, I'm not talking about sorcerers. I'm talking about people playing a spellcaster who don't do their homework. Some players need a little help in this area. You know who I'm talking about. They're never sure if they memorize their spells. They don't know what half their spells do. They don't know their save targets. They wait until it's their turn to borrow a player's handbook because they don't have one, and then they start looking up spells. Just making it the standard or requirement in your group to have some sort of a abbreviated spell sheet for each spellcasting character, list the effects, damages, save DCs, and all that, along with a note of what they normally prepare, can go a very long way towards speeding up those wayward wizards and clumsy clerics. Number 8, your slow rollers. Now, I think you're going to recognize this guy once I start talking about him. First, it's their turn. They're pretty slow to make a decision. Then, they need to look up the rule to what they want to do. Of course, they don't have a player's handbook, so they look it up on their phone, which was conveniently already out on the table since they've been playing The Sims Online the entire game session. Then, once they decide on their action, they'll still need to roll. Now, they've probably got either a set of fancy dice that are nearly impossible to read from any sort of distance, or they've got a classic set of the kind of dice you're supposed to crayon in from the early 80s, except they're not crayoned in. And they'll only have one of each dice. When it comes time to cast that fireball, instead of rolling 10d6 one time, they're going to roll 1d6 10 times. And who knows if the total is even right, because you can't read their dice in the first place. Number 9, arbitrary puzzles. These are really the fault of the module writer or the game master, but nothing can suck off a huge amount of not fun game time more than an arbitrary puzzle. Like a set of buttons that must be pressed in a correct order, or some totally arbitrary item that must be placed in the hand of a statue in order to open a door. And these are even worse if the knowledge or items required to solve the puzzle are not all located in one place. Now, for you game masters out there, I suggest minimizing these in your games. Or at the bare minimum, run them in a fast manner. If the PCs don't have all the items needed or knowledge needed to solve the puzzle, then just tell them that they failed to solve the puzzle. That lets them know that they can move on immediately. That way they're not sitting there arranging rocks on the altar in a different order for an hour and a half, never realizing that all they really need to do is set the rocks on the altar and pour holy water on them. Because they never read the poem on the wall in room 17. Because they didn't go to room 17. They went left instead of right. Finally, number 10. Game masters that won't move the action along. Sometimes the players just get to talking in circles, not making decisions, overthinking things, not making any progress. Maybe they're missing the obvious. They just let the game get stuck on something. Maybe the characters can't progress without finding that secret door that was actually in the first room of the dungeon. Instead, they've been scouring every other room in the place, never considering that they might have missed something in the first room. Some game masters will let that go on forever. The players just endlessly fighting wandering monsters, never finding the door to progress, eventually abandoning the mission entirely. Or, what your smart game master might do is, once the players are on their way back out, they go to exit the complex, they might just catch that secret door closing as they're entering that room on their way out. Maybe something just went through it. Then they know it's there. And you're not going to waste an entire game session on a search that doesn't really add anything to the game. Alright, I think that's all I've got for today. If you have any friends who don't add anything to the game, tell them about this channel. I could use the subs. Thanks, and hope to see you again soon.